Welcome to Eat, Drink, Think. I'm Amy O'Neill Hauk. In this podcast from Edible Communities, a network of magazines published across North America, we celebrate all things local and sustainable in the food world. Today, we're speaking with Andrew Zimmern and Barton Seaver, co-authors of the Blue Food Cookbook, the companion book to the PBS series Hope in the Water, which is a 3-part look at seafood as a solution to the environmental, food security, and food justice problems we face as a planet. Andrew is a creator and executive producer who focuses his work on food and global food systems. He has earned 4 James Beard Awards in his work to advocate for cultural understanding through food storytelling. He's been the creator and host of several shows, including What's Eating America and Wild Game Kitchen. Barton Seaver is a return guest to Eat, Drink, Think. He's an author, seafood expert, and food educator who's written 8 seafood-centric books, including For Cod and Country and The Joy of Seafood. The brand new Blue Food Cookbook is part seafood primer and part recipe collection, and it's filled with expert tips, favorite dishes, and fascinating anecdotes from both chefs. Andrew, Barton, welcome to Eat, Drink, Think.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy.
Well, we're glad you're here. Andrew, this book is billed, as I said, as a companion to Hope in the Water. For folks who have yet to see the program, can you tell us a little bit about the show and why you felt a companion cookbook would help to reinforce the show's mission?
It's pretty simple. We set out, for many years to make a documentary whose premise was that you can work on and out of our water systems, oceans, rivers, lakes, streams. You can produce from them and you can protect them at the same time. They are not mutually exclusive. And most of the documentary work to date, the storytelling to date, had posed it as an either-or issue, right? And I remember watching a real piece of junk on I think it was on Netflix called Seaspiracy. And at the very end of the documentary, the basic message is we just need to shut the oceans off. I mean, just stop. We just need to stop, right? Nothing on the water, nothing comes out of the water. Sort of exaggerating to make a point, but it was the general takeaway. And I was really outraged. There are billions of people whose primary source of protein comes out of the water, and there's 1 billion people who earn their living on the water. Forget about ancillary industries. You can't turn it off. And I also knew from my work in the aquaculture system world that aquaculture, and especially ocean-borne aquaculture, as opposed to land-based, is when managed the right way, is worth investing in because it works. And so I became quadruply outraged, and a bunch of us shared the same feeling, and we kind of hit the gas pedal on Hope in the Water, and thrilled that it has been as popular as it has been. David E. Kelly collaborated with us on it. Jennifer Bushman at Fed by Blue and her partners, my production company, Intuitive Content, made the work. And we were, as we were making it, we thought, well, at some point we need to do a book. And so, companion book is both accurate and also a little bit inaccurate. Companion books typically take their lead from the source material. This does not. There are actually some really cool foods that you see being made in Hope in the Water. None of those recipes are in here. But the ethos, the idea that there is a way to be a good global citizen, to eat sustainably, to eat more seafood, and then the notion of how to understand water systems, how to purchase fish and other seafoods, how to cook it, how to serve it, and all the other typical stuff that goes into a world-class cookbook became this new project. And obviously, it's a labor of love for all the folks involved in it, and I think it's turned out really beautifully. I'm very proud of the work, and it's been great to work with Barton on it.
And Barton, can you tell us how you and Andrew became collaborators and talk a little bit about what it was like to work together?
Well, first and foremost, I've learned so much through this collaboration. Andrew has earned and deserves his legend status as royalty in the culinary world. Just the breadth and depth of his experience. And I got to say, just when we pass documents back and forth, how much I enjoyed just reading the stories. And I think that readers will as well. But in the seafood space, there's the school of fish. We're only so many. And Andrew and I have been crossing paths in this sort of seafood evangelism work that we both have done in our own ways over the last decades plus, really. And so this was a natural coming together and something that I enjoyed greatly. And I think really reflects in the book that we had a good time doing this. And, there's some disagreements. There's some points where we agree wholeheartedly and think there should be no other way, right? But what's so fun about this is it really is a window into two great cooks, seafood cooks' minds, and sort of an invitation into the kitchen to hang out on a Friday night while we prepare a meal. And in that way, it's both an intimate as well as instructional document.
I really got that sense, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more, either of you, just about how you've done that. And it's, what you notice there's like tiny little notes from one or the other, sometimes to one or the other of you, that come in a little different font. So we see that like this is a comment versus this is an instruction in a recipe. Do you want to, Andrew, do you want to talk more about that?
Oh my God, we did. It was it at the end, it looks like such a simple thing, and it just, oh my gosh, how easy must it have been to construct this? The amount of tooth pulling with editors, designers, everyone else. Do we do a he said? Do we do it this way? Whose signature do we put on? Do we then put a signature under every recipe? Do we photograph the ones, we both have a linguine with clams, we both have a crab cake, we both have a chowder. Are those going to be double wide photographs or not? I mean, I think that was probably what the lion's share of the book was. Time was spent on, away from the writing part. So what is oftentimes the most simple thing is something that took the most amount of sweat equity. I think it turned out beautifully. I like the way it comes off very naturally. I think it's a nice Easter egg for people who actually read a cookbook cover to cover, because there are people who do that. There are other people who love to collect cookbooks and they thumb through and they just love scallops, and just anything with scallop, we're just going to cook that right away. And, everyone is going to approach it in a different way. And I hope people do take more time with this book, because and this isn't log rolling. I mean, you said it at the top. This is, Barton has written as many books about seafood as anybody, and his wisdom is in that book, and it's impressive and deep, and people are going to learn a lot from this book. But I think it's fun because of those elements that you just described, and I wish we were allowed to be a little more argumentative. Maybe when the movie comes out about the making of this book, obviously Jack Black will play me, Brad Pitt will play Barton. The argument scenes as we're hammering this out, Woodward and Bernstein, Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford, from All the President's Men, will be the Oscar-winning moment for both of the actors. It's fun, right? Disagreement is fun. Aaron Sorkin famously said that all you need to do to have a great scene is have two people in the same room disagreeing about something.
Yeah, for sure.
And there is no right way to cook something. There is a more proper way for a certain type of result, but the minute you start talking about different economic classes, different places in a country, different places within a culture, different countries, how about, on opposite sides of the world? I mean, in Japan, one of my favorite dishes, and I hope your audience members don't cringe, is chicken sashimi, which is done with a certain breed of chicken. It has to be harvested right away. It has to be. There are restaurants in New York, by the way, that serve it, Amy. I'd be happy to take you. It's delicious. I've made it and eaten it myself. You just have to have access to fresh chicken. And there's a scientific reasoning behind why farm fresh chicken eaten raw is not going to kill you. But just trust me, it doesn't. It's delicious. It's lovely. But, everywhere else, they're going to tell you, you should cook your chicken to over 160 degrees. Even that I disagree with, because white meat chicken is much better at about 145, resting to 150. And so the fun part to me about cooking, especially with someone else, even in written form, is you get to have differences of opinion. And I should add this, I hope that's freeing for readers to realize, I don't have to, there is no gospel of fish. It doesn't always have to be this way. It can also be done this way and still have a fantastic outcome.
Absolutely. In fact, I was going to ask about this later, but we're here already. So you mentioned that there are 2 takes on quite a few of the recipes, 2 dashis, 2 chowders, 2 crab cakes. And just like you said, I think it gives readers and cooks freedom. How did you decide which recipes to have 2 versions of? Was it that point of disagreement, or was there something else that inspired you when, okay, we have to have both of these in here?
I think it might have relied more on just sort of dishes that were so traditional, but that also had such room for variation on it. There's some dishes in there, like a ceviche, that openly and overtly calls for messing around with the recipe, right? Because it's seasonal. It's about the fish that's available there, right? So, but then there's more canonical recipes, like a crab cake, like a linguine and clam sauce, etc. And in those ways, it's drawing out little preferences for each. I use panko breadcrumbs. Chef uses Ritz crackers, or saltines, etc. And just little things like that tease out those teachable moments. And it's not always about the disagreement, because it's not, Andrew's crab cake is damn good. I'd eat that every day, right? As Andrew said, there's no wrong way to do this. And so it was more of those canonical ones that I think are really trying to create a baseline of understanding and sort of permission also for home cooks to feel like they can add their own point of view into recipes. And so in that way, it's teaching that confidence and competence in one's own skill set.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of cook that doesn't really adhere to recipes in general. That kind of cook has a lot of cookbooks, and they might look at 5 or 6 different chili recipes before they make their own. And you're kind of giving that permission right here on the page in one chapter. So that's kind of cool. So the term blue food has only been around for a few years, and consumers might be a little wary of new jargon or trends that can come at a pretty fast pace these days. But this term was coined by researchers and policymakers to have an internationally recognized notion that encompasses food from the water. Can you talk a little bit about what it means in the context of the new book and why you felt it was important to use it, Andrew?
Well, I think words matter. And I think when you're talking about a movement sufficient to help make a dent in multiple existential crises that we are enduring as a people, both regionally, by country of residence, and as a planet, I thought it was the perfect verbiage. The term blue food, has been tossed around in wonky academic circles for over a decade. It's amazing how someone asks you a question, you realize, wow, I should have, at some point in my life, I would have thought I would have gone and researched back and see who was the first person to use that phrase. But as distinguished from the green economy, land-based agriculture, right? The blue economy is something that is vastly underrepresented here in America. And that's where our primary readers are. And so I just loved the title. To me, the Blue Food Cookbook sort of says it all. And it gets people scratching their heads, which I think is good. Are they talking about blueberry pie and what's that one pea blossom that when it's cooked turns foods very, very blue? It's about food from the water. And I love sort of resetting people's expectations. When I made Bizarre Foods, I was very against that title until I realized in Webster's dictionary, the secondary definition for bizarre meant unique and interesting. And I was like, oh my God, I'm all for it, because now I get to people say, well, bizarre, that means weird. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It means unique and interesting, right? Look it up in the dictionary. And so I applaud that. And I do think a big umbrella food movement is helpful for people, because we can change the hunger dynamic in America. We can change the global climate crisis dynamic. We can change the employment dynamic, immigration dynamic, national, international security dynamic, food waste dynamic, if we were just doing more with our oceans while protecting them at the same time. And I think that's really important for people to understand.
If I may, additionally, one thing that I sort of pushed back against the title of Blue Food is that one thing that seafood does not need is more confusion. Like, blue food? Wait, are you talking about seafood? Yes, but we're calling it blue food now. Well, it's like, while I think there's some cost to that shift, what I think is the real gain, the real benefit here is that, in my opinion, and I think so many others, seafood is the only food that's considered guilty before proven innocent. There's so much wrong. The headlines that we read about seafood are slavery and supply chains, Fukushima radiation, horrible aquaculture practices, depleted oceans, blah, blah, blah. It's like, we never hear what's going right. And so seafood has this kind of miasma above it. And the idea that Blue Foods is an invitation for people to consider anew an ingredient category they might be familiar with, but they might not be familiar with how we can use it with intention to create positive public health, environmental, economic outcomes that Andrew has already mentioned, plus so many more. And so in that way, it really is that invitation to see seafood anew as not just a problem to be solved, but really as the tool by which we can make other positive outcomes happen.
Why didn't, instead of 2 crab cake recipes and 2 linguine with clam sauce recipes, we should have done the thing that like certain magazines do, where each region of the country has a different cover? We should have published half the books with one name and one title, and half the books with another, but it's the same inside them. We could have doubled our sales.
There you go. Sell the same book twice.
Yeah, you could have different SKUs. One starts from the back and one starts from the front. Sell it twice.
So Andrew is a pugilist. He's just looking for more fights with the editor, I think.
Okay, so Blue Food also encompasses plants. That's one way that the word seafood doesn't even work, right?
No, see, it does work. It's from the sea.
Okay. Work in people's minds.
Your point about plants that grow in fresh and salt water in our lakes, rivers, streams, and oceans is included in the book. We even have a dessert or two that are made with with plants that grow in the ocean. And that is a staggering new food category that our children will be swimming in, no pun intended, the exact opposite of as it was when I was growing up. I think UN World Food Program's statistics are that by 2050 in America, by gross tonnage, we'll be harvesting more seaweed in America than potatoes, to give people an idea of how quickly it is growing. And it's delicious, absolutely a delicious category of food that, by the way, has immense health benefits.
New in America, right? Not new globally.
That's correct.
You had a little bit of a skeptical face there for a second. Barton, did you have something to add?
Well, yes, this term seafood isn't analogous to sea veggies, sea greens, however they're referred to in whatever dialogue you're in. Just because you don't put kelp at the center of the plate as you do a piece of salmon, right? But you don't put beef in the same category as peas in the same way, and we don't call it land food, right? Which is encompassing of beef, chicken, pork, veal, turkey, everything else, right? So I do understand that. But I think the entry points that kelp, that seaweed, that dulse has to make are going to be in the produce section, right? You need to sell people on how they are used, not just on a name. And so in that way, Blue Food is a means to encompass that economic opportunity, the nutrition opportunity, the environmental stewardship opportunity that's represented by our efforts to put food forth from the water.
Well, let's talk about the inside of the book and some of the recipes. The book is organized in categories: bivalves, shellfish, whitefish, salmon, and more. And you mentioned in the introduction that one of the reasons for organizing this way is so that in some cases, people can make substitutions based on what they can find, what's fresh and available. And you give some compelling reasons for having that flexibility. Do you want to talk about what those reasons are?
Sure. The inherent nature of sustainability is about meeting needs, not desire, right? Need is finite, desire is infinite. In this way, when we go to the ocean and say, I want cod for dinner, we are creating an inherently unsustainable, demand-based economy, right? If all we're willing to eat is cod, then, well, all that's valuable to the fishermen is cod. All of that impact is going to be driven on one single species. But what about the pollock and haddock and hake, cuskling, monk, skate, wolf, dog, eel, rape, pout, plaice, dabs, flounders, which, I mean, I could go on, right? And these are all flaky white flesh fish. And if we go to the ocean, to the fishermen and say, hey, what's today's catch, right? And then we're willing to accept the answer. What we do is we've created an inherently more sustainable relationship with the ocean that's based on supply rather than on demand. And it gets us out thinking about, well, what do we need tonight? Well, I need a pound of fish to feed my family, right? I'm willing to accept what the ocean is capable of giving. This rationalizes the economy of fishing. It makes fishermen a lot more profitable in that whatever the ocean gives up is profitable to them. It also increases the quality that we're likely to get. If you go to the store and your recipe says cod and you say, I want the cod, you're going to get whatever cod they have, right? But if the pollock, this late summer fat, brilliant sheen of blue on the outside, it's got this mashed potato-like richness in the back palate, a little bit of acidity from the lactic acid that's kind of signature of that species, and it is just glistening in the case. And oh, by the way, it's $4.99 a pound for fillet. And you say, I'll pay $17.99 for the cod that was caught 2 weeks ago in Norway. Like, okay, and that's your choice to do. But our argument is that you're likely to better enjoy the fish. The fishermen are better profit to it, and we're in an inherently more sustainable relationship with our oceans if we're simply willing to say, what's the catch of the day?
And that leads me to your discussion of the fish counter and the fishmonger, which I really enjoyed. There's a level of detail about what seafood should look like, what it should smell like, even what it should feel like, that I think both seafood novices and more experienced cooks are going to really appreciate. Andrew, since a lot of folks may be new to buying fish that way, can you tell us a bit about how to approach the fish counter and what questions somebody might ask?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of scenarios here, and let's forget about the one from the people who live in a small coastal town and they already have a dock they go down to, and there are people pulling fish out of the water, and they can very easily, look at, everything was caught that day. It's maybe in a big cooler on ice, or maybe not even, and you're simply grabbing a couple of fish and they're being rolled up in a paper bag and you're taking them home. You're either in a market that specializes in selling seafood, or you're in a supermarket with a counter, or a supermarket that maybe doesn't have a counter but has what I call a fish specialist, someone who's filleting the fish, wrapping the fish, and putting it into the refrigerated case. I think what's important here, probably the most important thing that I could ever tell anyone about buying fish and shellfish of any type, is it is okay to ask questions. It is okay to ask questions. Not only is it okay, but you should. Because if you don't know where your seafood comes from, and if someone can't tell you where it comes from, you shouldn't be buying it. And by the way, that applies to your pickles, your fresh oranges, and your pork chops as well, right? We have labeling laws, and by the way, they're far from perfect in America. In fact, we have a lot of work to do on labeling all things. Seafood lags behind all of them. So ask questions. If you were in a supermarket or a seafood shop where there is someone behind a counter who says, how can I help you today? Ask them what's fresh. Tell them what you have in mind. Tell them what your idea was walking in. Have a conversation. Number one, conversation amongst human beings seemingly occurs less and less these days. I would encourage people to have more conversations. That's where I learn things. I go into the seafood shop and I am making my escabeche no matter what. And I get there and the fish that I need isn't there, and the other 3 or 4 that I could use maybe isn't there either. So I can say, hey, here's what I'm doing. You don't have any in the back. Maybe it's just come in and hasn't come out to the counter yet. No. What am I going to do instead? You talk to the guy behind the fish counter, the lady behind the fish counter. It's really easy. Let them tell you what you should be cooking that night, to Barton's cod halibut story from a moment ago. From a dynamic about looking at fish, everybody says, well, eyes should be clear, gills should be bright red, it should smell like the ocean, like you just dove under a wave, and shouldn't smell spoiled or ammoniated. And when you touch the top loin of a fish of a certain size, it should spring back into shape, and on and on and on. Fins shouldn't be dried up at the ends of them. And I mean, we could keep going on ad nauseum. I have found that there's excuses for all of those not to be the case. However, in general, taken as a whole, it's a great standard, right? Asking them when it came in, right? Was it frozen at sea and defrosted, right? Did it come from a sustainable fishery, right? There are some markets, and I have no financial relationship with them, but Hy-Vee is a big Midwestern, it's a landlocked supermarket chain of like 500 grocery stores, right? They have dedicated themselves to only carrying sustainable seafood in their cases, right? That's a company-wide edict. So you can trust that market when you go in there that it's been sourced sustainably, but that doesn't mean that every fish in the case has been created equal. right? So you do need to talk to the person behind there. If you're in a supermarket where everything's already been portioned and is in plastic wrap, read the label. A lot of times there's information on there that's really important. And you can always ask to speak to the person in charge of that program. I think asking questions and being a curious shopper is of the utmost importance, and we seem to have willingly, in the advent of the world of Wagyu, people are now trying to ascertain by talking to people without even thinking twice about it why they should spend or why they are spending $30 for a steak or 50 or 100, right? But the same is true of seafood, and we know less and less. Most cooks know less and less about it. So I think asking questions, being curious, remaining teachable is where it's at. And we do give some great pointers in the book as to how to determine on your own whether or not seafood is fresh. And by the way, it is okay to ask somebody to smell something. It is okay.
Yeah. And then I think in the book you say, ask them if you want to do the touch test, ask the fishmonger to do it for you. And then you can watch them do it.
It's really simple. If you're buying, there's more and more whole fish for sale in markets. And obviously I'm talking about fish that weigh under 10 pounds, right? Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to buy a whole swordfish in a fish market these days. The fact of the matter is that, if there's, porgies and bronzinos and red snappers and small whole cod in a case, you can ask them, touch the top loin, see how it springs back or not. It'd tell you a lot about how the fish is handled. I can tell you that.
And one of the things that the book acknowledges is that many cooks buy mostly frozen fish, and you encourage that and share ways in which fish can be just as fresh, if not fresher, than what's at the fish counter. Barton, are there any types of seafood or fish that you wouldn't recommend as a frozen product?
Not really. I've been even blown away by frozen oysters on the half shell raw. Truly blown away. Like my chef mind was run over with a steamroll. Like, what? Like, but you know what? This is part of living and learning and the innovations that are happening in the seafood industry that are oriented towards increased quality, decreased perishability, increased deliciousness, et cetera. So there's really nothing that I found disagreeable on the whole. When seafood is frozen improperly, when it is stored improperly as a frozen, when it is thawed, then frozen back. Yes. There's all sorts of ways to screw up seafood. Yes. But when its integrity has been maintained through the supply chain down to the point where it hits your cutting board, it's really inspiring. And when you talk about frozen seafood, there's so many benefits to it. Perishability of product is so high with seafood that we are paying a whole lot of money as consumers for that shrink, right? It's estimated that almost 50% of seafood in America is wasted. That's a Sierra Club number. We're paying for that ultimately. And frozen technology, when done right, really dramatically decreases that. And so you're getting a quality product at likely a much better price, and it makes it a convenience food. On a Wednesday night, you say, oh, crap, what am I feeding my family for dinner? Great, I've got frozen sockeye steaks in the freezer that I can put directly into my toaster oven from frozen. And all of a sudden, seafood, with all of its healthfulness, all of its environmental, positive environmental impacts, becomes reality. And that's what I love about frozen seafood. There's always going to be a place for fresh seafood. It's great. It's what it is. But the fact that we now can have frozen seafood that is, from a culinary perspective, 95% of the quality of fresh, woo, I'm all in.
Or 100%. I would add I just ate some frozen scallops the other day, packed under a new system from a supplier I hadn't tasted before, and had I not defrosted them myself, I would have sworn they were, literally taken out of the water 2 hours ago. And they cooked up that way. I cooked them as well. So, I handled them from start to finish. I defrosted them, cooked them, could not believe it. Could not, stunned, gobsmacked. A word about food waste. The national numbers on food here in America are about 40%. The majority of that is pre-consumer contact. So to put Barton's number of 50% in context, that is a much bigger number when you think about how the weighted averages of other food categories have to bring that down, especially considering the fact that we don't eat as much seafood as we do vegetables, chicken, beef, pork, bread products, etc. And the second thing is, and I just want to put a big fat underline on it, is this notion that a lot of seafood, because of labeling laws, that is in many parts of the world, including the United States, something that is frozen at sea, if it's defrosted at the wholesaler, can be sold as fresh blank. It does not have to say previously frozen. Now, some supermarkets and other purveyors will say previously frozen because they're sick of being asked the question, and because the word is leaking out, thanks to conversations like this, that a lot of seafood is frozen that you don't even realize is frozen. In fact, you may have never eaten fresh blank because it all comes in frozen. I had some friends of mine here in Minnesota say something about that regarding shrimp. And I clued them into the fact that, unless you're living in Florida or the Gulf or in certain parts of the West Coast during certain types of shrimp season, you are always eating frozen shrimp, always. And they were like, no. And I was like, yes. So it's a tough concept for people to get their arms around, but I would just let people know, as we say in the book, frozen is good.
Yeah. I live where there's a shrimp fishery, and it's frozen at sea. I mean, I get it the day they come back from the docks, but it's already frozen, and it's delicious. Okay. I know from our previous discussion, Barton, that you're a forage fish evangelist. So I want to hear from Andrew about this. There's this really robust section in the book on preserved and tinned fish recipes. And I think that's great because who doesn't love to create something delicious from treasures in your pantry? Can you talk about that section and tell about some of your favorite ideas that are in there, Andrew?
Wow, you're taking the joy of Barton's sardine juice shooters habit away from him. This is a true story, by the way. When remarking about how delicious some of the olive oil and seasonings are in certain high-end sardine products, Barton exclaimed the other day in a conversation that you just drain it and you just kick it back like a shooter. And I was just
it's like a pickleback, but it's a sardine back. Why not?
But you did say open a bottle of clam juice and take a sip. That is in the book.
You have to. Yeah. You have to. I can't tell you how many brands of clam juice are just nasty salt bombs, and then you open another one up and you're like, wow, that tastes like clam juice. I could sip that. There's a big difference before you just dump it into your soup or braise. Anyway, I digress. I love tinned fish. I love preserved anything. I love Chinese dried scallops. I mean, slice me thin and call me coleslaw. But there's so many different things to do with it. Look, as Americans, we don't give a pouch of tuna at the supermarket a second thought. We crumble it over a salad. We mix it with mayonnaise and a little bit of celery and onion or whatever people like to season their tuna fish salad with, and we love it. But the idea of mackerel, salmon, clams, mussels, sardines, any one of a dozen other types of seafood that are traditionally tinned, being preserved that way it's glorious. And the more sustainable the source of the fish, the better. There are fantastic tin fish products. Everyone thinks, oh, Portugal, Portugal, Portugal. Yes. Most famously from Portugal, but the Spanish, the French, the North Africans, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, even Egyptian tin seafood is fantastic. There are so many other places around the world where they are tinning fish. Seasoned tin fish is delicious. I happen to be a big fan of taking anything out of a tin, using what it was seasoned with for a secondary thing, a marinade, a salad dressing, a finishing sauce for the broccoli that you're going to serve with it, right, is just glorious, and marry up some flavor notes. But I really love taking sardines out of the tin, putting them over a bed of thinly shaved fennel or radishes or cucumbers, anything crispy, and making a very sturdy mustard vinaigrette of my own, and just spooning a little bit over it, maybe another little drizzle of olive oil out of that can. And people are like, oh my God, where did you get this? And I'm like, from my pantry. It was in a tin. It is, I hope more people eat tin fish because the price would come down. Right now, the problem with a lot of tin fish is that imports, tariffs, a lack of movement, our current economic situation, you see a lot of price fluctuation. And people often are asking me, well, what's the difference between the $30 anchovies and the $5 anchovies? And if they're from the Cantabrian Sea in the north of Spain, it's a quality issue and everything is done by hand. They're the most delicious anchovies I've ever tasted. When it comes to certain types of sardines, sometimes you're paying for the name on the label. I think there's been more written about tinned fish in the last 5 years than in all of human history. And there are some fantastic roundups, really. I mean, you could query on whatever online source you have, Google or otherwise, and say best tinned fish brands, and up will pop several different magazines that have all had their editors sit around and taste, and start with one and see what you like. I also happen to think they're gorgeous to look at. And not only what's in the tin, but what's on the outside of the tin as well. It gives me pleasure. And yeah, I can make linguine with clam sauce with tinned clams and have dinner on the table in 12 minutes.
Okay, Barton, you can weigh in too.
So some of my favorites are a little unexpected, making a tomato sauce, but out of canned mackerel instead. Making chowders with tinned smoked mussels that don't need to be further cooked, but rather stirred in at the very last minute in order to bloom their flavor, to revive their texture and their sort of vivacity in them. That's one of the things I love the most about tinned seafood, preserved seafood, is that it has such presence that all it needs is it's like it's like a glass of whiskey that just needs that drop of water, and all of a sudden it is something much greater than itself. But some of those foods that are not traditional to the American cuisine canon. We have one dish in the book of sun-dried shrimp. There's a wonderful product coming out of a Hmong community in Southwest Louisiana that is doing a traditional Southeast Asian style dried shrimp. And these are fantastic when rehydrated just a little bit in vinegar with some whole grain mustard, thrown with some walnuts and spicy greens over some roasted butternut squash. Woo, okay, like now you're starting to get sexy on me. Look, this is good eating, right? And what did I do for this? I reached over there, grabbed a bag, and just bam, there you go. And so delivers such huge flavor with such little effort. But the king of this category is the anchovy, the humble tinned anchovy. And yes, there's Cantabrian anchovies that you can spend a fortune on. There's also the really delicious ones that you can get for $2. I've got my brands. I like the yellow brand. I like the red brand. I use them. I literally buy them by the case, and I put them in everything. It's how my kids get their omega-3s every day in the salad dressing that we eat. They go into my chicken braises and my pork braises. They go into everything. And I cannot exclaim enough, as Andrew and I both do in the book. We preach our anchovy sermon loud, strong, and proud.
Those red or yellow tins, you take one of them and put it into, with a stick of butter and your shallots and your lemon juice and your herbs for your compound herb butter, but add anchovies, even with the olive oil, right in to the food processor, and it literally changes the game when it goes on anything. And I'm hard pressed to I've always kept anchovies in my refrigerator. My dad always did. I start a lot of dishes. I don't think there's a sofrito or a mirepoix that I start these days that doesn't throw a couple of them in there. No one even knows that they're there. I would add one thing about Barton's smoked mussels. I was at restaurant Dominique Crenn about 2 years ago, 3-star Michelin restaurant in San Francisco. I think Dominique Crenn is, one of the 20 best chefs working in the world today. And I had an incredible piece of fish, and there was a smoked mussel sauce. And she had smoked the mussels and smoked the cream, and there was all these steps along with it. So I wanted to recreate that dish at home. It was really genius. And I just took smoked mussels out of the thing. I drained them. I patted them dry. And I just steeped them in a little bit of cream until it thickened. And then I seasoned it with some chives and a couple of drops of lemon juice. And I just spooned that over it was a poached whitefish. I forget whether it was cod or haddock. It was something that was on sale at my seafood shop that was good. And it took it from a B+ to about an A+++, with the simple addition of something tinned. So I would tell people experimentation should be at the heart of everything that you do with fish and shellfish, seaweeds, anything else that comes from the water, and especially if it comes from a tin.
So you had described family meals a lot in the book, Andrew. It's clear that seafood has been important to you pretty much your whole life. Do you have, or can you tell us maybe an ideal Blue Food-centric meal?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it's really easy because it's part of my death row meal, but it was also the meal that I would have on the beach as a child with my family growing up. My whole life. At some point during the day, my dad would drive in the car, usually during the heat of the day, when he didn't want to read his book anymore and he didn't want to swim anymore. And we knew we were cooking and the tide was coming in with some big waves. And he would go to the bay side, sometimes take me with him, and we'd dig up, a couple dozen clams, keep them in a bucket down by the edge of the water so that they would stay cold, and most importantly, give off any grit that they had inside them. We'd chuck clams and just eat them on the half shell. My mom would make mussels with tomatoes from her garden and garlic and a little bit of white wine in a big pot that always remember her shaking them up and down. And then we'd all pick. You had to eat all the mussels in the pot. And then what was at the bottom was cool enough that you could reach in with these little plastic mugs that she had. I don't know why those always went to the beach. And then you would drink that and dunk stale bread in it and just do that whole thing. And meanwhile, my father, would have stuck a line out in the water. He loved to surf cast, and had some kind of fish on the grill in pretty short order, especially at the end of the summer, when the striped bass and the bluefish were coming closer to shore, feeding on little fish that were in there. And that to me is about as good a meal as you can possibly have. And it was the meal of my childhood that we ate over and over and over again. And I wish I could share that meal with my parents one more time. And yes, family dining, family eating has gone out of favor. I even made a television show called Family Dinner. And the whole premise was I wanted everyone around the country to see what it looked like to eat dinner with your family and hear the stories in the hopes that it would inspire other people to do so, even if you could only do it once a month. You just got to do it.
And Barton, you're a pro at sane ideas for busy families. So what should we be throwing together for dinner tomorrow night if we had our hands on the new cookbook?
Well, one of my go-tos is, I'm not sure this is in the book, but cherry tomatoes. I mean, we are in peak sun gold cherry tomato season right now. They are at their perfection. A good glug of olive oil in a cast iron pan, a whole bunch of garlic. Throw your cherry tomatoes in there. As soon as they begin to release even just a little bit of their juice, then you nestle in a piece of skin-on sockeye salmon running fresh right now. You put the whole thing under the broiler. In about 9 minutes, you've got an absolutely perfect piece of fish. The moisture in the fish has been protected, but anything that it's exuded is now emulsified in with that olive oil and those now reduced tomato juices. Ooh, that garlic is kind of crispy. The skin on that sockeye is looking pretty good. You can audibly hear it with your fork, like, "Ha, man, donkey!" Like this is incredible, right? And it takes about 14 minutes total, start to finish. But the other thing is, hey, I'm a parent. I've got a 5-year-old. I got a 9-year-old. Anybody listening who's a parent or knows a parent knows that parenting is survival, right? I am not ashamed to say I make a fair bit of Annie's mac and cheese in this house. But you know what? My children don't know that Annie's mac and cheese doesn't come with tuna fish in it. It's just magically how it's always been, right? And peas too. So they go over to their friend's house and they're like, what's this? And it's like, oh, they don't buy the same recipe we do. So there's ways to get it in there and survive Tuesdays all at the same time.
Awesome. To wrap up, I'm curious from both of you, what are you most optimistic about when it comes to blue food and eaters in the United States? Andrew, do you want to start?
That there is an ongoing amount of education and awareness that is noticeable. Follow the money with everything. Our publisher wouldn't have bought this book if they didn't think that this was important. But they wouldn't have bought this book if they didn't think, they're not in the business of being public servants. They're trying to sell books. And so the fact that this book sold and that there's this much interest in it gives me a tremendous amount of optimism because I tend to be a negative future fantasizer. That's number one. I will throw in, because I can't help it. I do want people to cook a meal from the ocean one more time a week. That's it. Just cook a meal, from the water one more time a week. That's all it would take to help support a huge piece of our economy that's desperate to be supported. Those are American fisheries. And it's better for your wellness. It's better for your kids. It's better for everyone. It's better for our environment. And the more that we're buying seafood, it's one less mega mansion on the water that's going to be built, and it's one more fishing pier, commercial one, that will stay in existence. And that's a very important piece of the equation. I'm not against people with money building big houses, but we've almost used up every inch of our shoreline. And sooner or later, the American fisheries will be launching out of big commercial cities, and it will take them too long to get to fishing grounds, and it won't be worth it. And we are at a hinge point in the survival of those fisheries, and I'd like to see them maintain. And for a whole bunch of different reasons we talked about at the beginning of the show. And so that's my fervent hope. That's what makes me optimistic, but I also have a asterisk.
Barton?
We've spoken about this in numerous ways, I think, throughout the course of this conversation, but this cookbook is tapping into the zeitgeist that Andrew and I both see coming, which is that people are begging for permission to fall in love with seafood. And that's what we're offering. We're offering you permission from two seasoned veterans that have been on the water, that have been in the farms, that have been in the communities. I live here in Maine, next to lobstermen and oyster farmers. We understand intimately what good can come from increased seafood consumption, especially when we put an eye towards intention. What are we using this seafood to accomplish? Whether it's, preserving working waterfronts, as Andrew was just saying, whether it's increased public health outcomes, whether it's looking at women's economic empowerment through aquaculture, which is a relatively new industry, and how do we use our dollars to create systems that are built around equity and inclusion. These are things that are beginning to diversify the conversation about seafood. It's no longer just sustainability. Don't screw something up. Like, okay, that's a really great place to start. But Andrew and I have seen enough to have the hope validated that we can use seafood to really create very positive outcomes, delicious outcomes, easy outcomes, accessible outcomes that meet people where they are and allow them to use seafood to accomplish their goals.
That's great. Well, Andrew, Barton, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you to the entire Edible community. Not only the publishers, but the readers and the people that support your advertisers. You are such a nucleus of the community that Andrew and I so proudly are a part of. And without the work that you do, without all of you who are listening today and your support of these communities, this narrative would not be at the fore as it is. So we stand in adoration and honor of you.
We appreciate it. We've been speaking with Barton Seaver and Andrew Zimmern, authors of the Blue Food Cookbook. Thank you for joining us today at Eat, Drink, Think. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to pick up your local Edible magazine. You can find show notes for today's episode at ediblecommunities.com.